The next question which I want to ask you is regarding the challenges. You said that to India in your speech you said that India is there's a huge opportunity, but there are some challenges as well. So for your company, what are some of those challenges which concerns you, and how you're trying to address those challenges?
I mean, there are certain challenges which are generic to the sector and to doing business in India.
Right.
For irrespective of how much you talk about ease of business, the bottom line is that the compliance structure we have is very complex. So the taxation, the audit, and that's the nuts and bolts. You have to get you have to do that right. And if you are a foreign company in India, then you have transfer pricing rules. You have so that I don't think is becoming simpler. Irrespective of ease of doing business, it's not becoming simpler. So it takes up a lot of my time. So that's certainly something which is, and the other thing is that our biggest customer still remains government. So government funded institutions, really. So while it's not a China-like situation where every arrangement has to be done with the government, you still are dependent on something which you can have no control over. So if funds come, things will flow. If they don't come, but these are challenges of being in this business, I would say. But they impact your strategy, the way you plan. For example, what are the others? So are there any? We are looking increasingly, a lot of our new business, our incremental business is coming from non-government sources. So there are a lot of private educational institutions. Of course, nobody's as big as the government, or they are corporate. So you have to find new ways, or we certainly have to look at new. A lot of publishing traditionally has been Delhi-centric. Regionally networks have not been so strong. So that is something then. So you are actually wading into territories which traditionally, as a publisher, you won't. And actually that comes back again to the agility aspect. So you are now, earlier you would connect maybe with your distributor in the supply chain, and say, okay, here, and he would connect with the institution. But now you need to connect with the end users. Also, you need to support the end users to get your product which is not reaching them directly. And that end user could be an individual researcher, it could be an institution. So you have to now support the supply chain. It's not something you ever thought about. So the way you work on your business plans and strategies, and the way you invest your resources, all this impacts. Right? So these are. So you have to constantly keep sort of rethinking old models, thinking of ideas which. The other interesting thing in the Indian context is that you actually incremental strategies work well. So it's not that you have to go from A and think of a radically new thing to do. You could actually make gains by being incremental sometimes. So you have a blended strategy of traditional and digital, say.
So you talked about in an earlier discussion, you also talked about the process aspect, right? That there's a process to doing a particular thing. So would you tell our viewers that do you follow a process for strategic planning in your organization? Is it a formal process, or how you go about doing the strategic planning?
Well, there are two ways of answering this. One is if you look at the organizational context, and if you look at individual units within the organization, then certainly there are formal processes in place. If you ask me personally as a leader, I would say that for me it's sort of a lot more intuitive. So it really comes out of everyday functioning. Of course, the organization has a vision. There's a general direction that we have. I am an Indian head of a global company. So the broader space is set in a sense, and then you operate. You look at your local situation and context, and you position yourself using local strengths along with your global strength. So that stage is set. But within that, after that, for me it's more intuitive. It arises out of everyday functioning, out of talking to stakeholders, out of just going out there, being in the marketplace, engaging, get a sense firsthand. That's one part of it. The other part comes from actually engaging internally with teams, with groups of people who are engaging directly with customers, or even the dynamic within the organization. I think all those things influence the way that eventually one. And yes, finally, your strategy is something which you actually do put down, and it's a tool I use, and it's a rule I have. I mean, anything I want to be able to explain to somebody, I should be able to put down in 2 or 3. You know, if I can put it down in 1 page, I'm sorted.
Okay.
So, because if I want to discuss it and I want to explain it, the simpler it is, the better it is. To get to that 1 page, I sometimes have to spend, you know, weeks, months, tens of thousands of interactions, and somebody, a team member says may trigger off something, which then makes the pieces fit or fall into place.
So you know, and it's very interesting that, you know, you say intuition plays a very important role when you talk of strategy planning. So how far in the future do you look when you're thinking of a strategy? Do you look for a 3-year horizon, 5-year horizon, or maybe 10-year, or do you also talk of, say, 2050, which is, you know, so when you're thinking about strategy planning, how far do you look into the future and then start looking backward and integrate the resources which you have and try to come up with a strategic plan?
I mentioned earlier, one of the things which is happening in our industry is things are changing so fast. That to actually predict far into the future would be foolish. Because the people who predicted in 2000 that the print book would be dead by 2010, you know, are now eating their words and having to scramble around so they were completely wrong. And this was not 1 or 2 people, this was a huge industry in itself saying print is finished. So, but having said that, you know, you are running an organization, you are responsible for its making it future proof, for reducing risk, for growth. You have to look ahead. So I would say, as an organization globally, we've been working on 3-year plans. In India, I feel you know, it's the whole 5-year plan approach. So I have, like sitting here today, I have a 2020 target. So that's the time frame I'm looking at. But as I said to you right in the beginning, for me, yes, I have a 5-pronged strategy for 2020. There are various heads which it has, and, you know, we are evolving the way it goes. But, you know, in 2018, I may just move the emphasis, recalibrate, shift it around. So for me, it's a work in progress. It's a piece which, you know, keeps, and it may at some times be contradictory. So something I may do may actually be not linearly fitting into the strategy I have. But I think if you're clear on the vision and if you're clear on the basics and where you're headed, like I am clear that as a academic publisher of stature, an international academic publisher of stature in India, I want to be somebody who is able to take high quality Indian content to global platforms. And I believe that future proofs my business in India, because having sufficient local content helps drive sales of my total content. So it's a two-way thing for me. I'm clear that is a big goal. Now, how I go about achieving it, what I emphasize at what stage, you know, may change. And the other thing is that, you know, I'm responsible for short-term revenue as well. Every year I may have a 5-year strategic plan, but, you know, nobody's going to sit and say, okay, let's wait, let's give her the first 3 years while she doesn't make any money and doesn't show any growth and look at year 5. That's not how businesses run or organizations run today. So I have to deliver the proximate goals, the short-term things.
Now, when you're trying to formulate your strategy, and we're coming back to this topic of formulation, you know, you'll come across, there could be multiple nuances that can come your way. So, how you go about managing, if you can take 1 or 2 examples of these nuances, and if you give some examples of how you manage such nuances.
See, I already mentioned the fact that we are a local part of a global company. So just the local, global, what my colleagues call creative tension. But it can also be disruptive.
It could be positive and it could...
it could also be. So it needs to be managed so it's creative and it's creating an environment where you can leverage the global strengths for local growth. And also there's a cultural aspect. We are global. Yes, you know, there are seamless networks, but cultural nuances do exist. Communication, which is such an important part of any strategic thing that you do as a leader, is culturally sort of, nuanced. So that, and biases do creep in, unconscious sometimes. I mean, we have a unconscious bias workshops running in our company because people need to, are we sort of tripping ourselves up? So that certainly is something you have to. The other thing is that we operate in a matrix structure.
So dual reporting kind of.
Yeah, so dual reporting is there, functional, again the global local comes in there, proximate goals as opposed to longer term goals, local as opposed to global. And since it's not, there will be overlaps, there will be,
Correct.
so
Duplication at times.
duplication, overlaps, face-offs, I mean completely contradictory things,
Right.
So this is a situation, I mean you face it all the time.
So what you're indicating is that level of balancing act which you need to do at the
That's
position
one.
which you're
Yeah, I think you have to. And also you have to show flexibility. I think that's a key, and that's what That's another way of saying agility. But you need to have plans and processes, but you also need to have, an open mind. You have to have that flexible sort of ability. And the other thing, of course, is building networks of influence. I view the matrix or the global local connect as they are my internal customers. It's that. If I can give them something they want, they are more than happy to open up to ideas I have. So it's exactly the same way I treat them. I treat them like internal customers. And you have to show the same degree of patience and tact that you do show with your customer. A customer is always right. You have to do, the moment you put on that cap internally, I'm not saying the nuances get resolved, they don't. You could say I spend, a significant part of my time navigating these, shoals, as it were.